In this episode, we're going to discuss why a belief in a God higher than yourself is essential to be at your best for your children. We're also going to discuss why teaching your kids to be spiritually connected can give them many advantages in life over other dads who choose not to. All this in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our proud sponsor of this episode and the Fatherhood Challenge, Ingenious Prep. Ingenious Prep is the world's premier admissions consulting firm, proud to be officially recognized as the country's top college admissions consultants, helping students prepare for admissions to top schools through individualized educational programs that increase chances of admission by up to 10 times. Ingenious Prep students work with former admission officers to differentiate themselves from other competitive students in 3 areas colleges evaluate students: in academics, extracurricular activities, and personal characteristics. Just this past admission cycle, Ingenious Prep students have secured 110 offers from Ivy League schools, 268 offers from top 20 schools, and 904 offers from top 50 schools. Ingenious Prep student success lies within the fact that Ingenious Prep is an all-in-one consulting firm offering every service a family needs, whether it be test prep, tailored candidacy building mentorship, academic mentorships, the Leadership and Innovation Lab, soft skills courses, writing courses, and other customized programs to develop their application persona to the most effective and authentic extent to share with colleges. Just click on the link in the episode description to book a free strategy call with one of Ingenious Prep's college experts. Or you can visit ingeniusprep.com. That's ingeniusprep.com. And let them know you came from the Fatherhood Challenge.
Welcome to the Fatherhood Challenge, a movement to awaken and inspire fathers everywhere to take great pride in their role and to challenge society to understand how important fathers are to the stability and culture of their family's environment. Now, here's your host, Jonathan Guerrero.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My guest is Bryan Ward. Bryan is a dad, husband, and creator and co-host of a top-rated podcast called Dad Up Podcast. Bryan has also coached countless fathers on becoming the best dad that they can be for their families. Bryan, thank you so much for being on the Fatherhood Challenge.
Thank you very much for having me, brother. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Bryan, what is your favorite dad joke?
Which one? I think dads probably have a few in their belts that they keep around. I think I've thrown so many at my kids that they're not really into them anymore. They're 25 and 22. They're like, okay, whatever, Dad. No, the first one that comes to mind is when I was looking at the question, I was like, okay, I could think of the one that I always go to. That's a simple one, but it's how do you organize a party in space?
Party in space. I have no idea.
You plan it. And then the other one I like to use is why did this involves a bar, but why did the dad bring his ladder to the bar?
I have no idea.
Because the drinks are on the house. So those are my two go-tos. But
love it.
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, what is your story behind why and how you started the Dad Up podcast?
It's interesting. I went through a phase in my life where I've been a pretty I'd like to call myself a pretty successful dad, in that I was always intentional with my time with my boys. I was always around. I was always doing things with them. I was always the one being responsible for them when it comes to field trips. I was always at their parent-teacher conferences, open house. I was at everything. I mean, it just wasn't a thing that I wasn't at. My wife and I both. And I had an opportunity when my older son, who's now 25, I was signing him up for a Little League baseball. And the guy looked at me and said, hey, do you want to coach? And I said, oh, no, man, I know what baseball is and I know how to play. I know the rules and all that, but I have no idea how to coach. And he goes, bro, they're 4 years old. They're going to play with the grass and they're going to run around. Just teach them the basics. I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So that's how kind of how my journey as to really diving in as a dad really got started, because I started coaching when my older son was 4. I coached both my boys. I've coached my nephews, and I coached them all the way up through high school, including once they graduated high school. I continued to coach at the high school level. My point is that When my younger son had reached his senior year of high school, my older son at the time was in college. And I felt like this pit in my stomach. I felt almost a sadness to this journey that I had been on for all these years. It really caused me to go not into heavy depression, but I had like this slight bit of anxiety or depression come over me that I just didn't know how to handle it. And that was that my younger son was about to leave the house, go to college, and I felt like my dad journey was over. I felt like it had come to an end. We as dads know that doesn't ever happen, right? We're always going to be dads forever. But for me, because I had been such an involved dad, that was all I knew. That was everything that I knew. And I felt like that was gone. It was going to be over. And I was talking to I was telling my wife about it and telling her how I was feeling. And I was talking to a couple of family members about it. And one of them said, well, Bryan, you have been such a successful or a great dad with Blake and Brett, my two boys. Maybe this is a time now for you to reflect and maybe give back to other dads. And I said, what do you mean? And it's, what about doing a podcast? And I went, maybe. I don't know much about podcasts. I don't even know how to get started, but maybe I'll give it some thought. You could do podcasts where you're talking to, athletes, celebrities, entrepreneurs, pastors, authors, just getting their experiences as dads. And maybe it'll resonate with another dad out there. Maybe they share something that will really hit home for another dad that's listening. And so I thought about it. I went home, talked to my wife about it. She said, that would be great. You would be phenomenal at it. And the rest is history. 250 episodes later, 4.5 years, almost 5 years in, I've been featured on a number of publications. I've been featured on radio. I've been featured on CNN. Did an interview on me. It's been a journey. It's been a ride, and it's been a lot of fun. But it all started from just having a sense of almost like loss, sadness, and God opened my heart and said, "Hey, I have more in your life. That I have more purpose for you than what you think of just being a dad. And this is the journey I want to take you on." And now I get to coach dads out there. I have dads that are clients of mine that I coach. So it's just opened up a whole new world for me.
I had a guest on, his name was Chris Bruno, and he wrote a book called Sage. And a sage is a wise person that mentors younger people through their journeys based on their own experiences and their own wisdom that they've learned over the years. And that's what you've become for many dads is a sage. And to really add to it, there are a lot of so-called sages out there in the dad space. And we're going to get to this. There's a lot of people out there that call themselves dad coaches. It's all over the place. But the reason you and I are talking is because you have a unique advantage over everybody else who claims to be in that same space. It's the fact that you're spiritually guided and you're spiritually led and directed through your journey, not only through your journey through fatherhood, but now in your new role as a sage and a leader and a coach to other dads. You are spiritually guided, which gives you this huge advantage over everybody else. Because when it comes to topics and agendas, you're right at the center of God's heart. And we'll touch on that more later. Tell me about your most memorable guest. What made that episode so impactful to both you and your audiences?
Listen, I have a couple of episodes that I could reflect on that the individuals that I interviewed really were just a checked in, all in dad that was successful. I had, there's been 3 of them now that I have interviewed that were, they just checked every box. And they were so impressive to me. And those 3 individuals sadly have passed away since our recording. And what's so touching about that is that I was able to have an impact not only on their life, but I was also able to have an impact on their family's life, because now they have a recording of their dad, or now they have a recording of their husband sharing moments of them and their family together. And so they will have that forever. It's on the podcast. They'll have it forever. And so as sad as I am that those 3 individuals had passed away, it just makes me feel good that I took part in helping their family continue the memory of the dad or the husband. So those are super memorable to me, and I don't want to list their names, but those three guys are super memorable to me. One of them's an actual TV host or television newscaster, and another guy owned a franchise gym, and another guy was a very successful author. So it's just those three guys. Their deaths were sudden; they weren't expected, but the fact that their family now can have their voice forever talking about them. Their children that were little will now hear that when they're in their teenage years going, my dad passed away when I was little, but I get to hear him talk about me and talk about his relationship with me when I was little. So now I can understand it. Now I can get a sense of it, right? Because he's hearing the dad talk about it. So those three are really, really memorable. However, I have three others, and these three are super important to me. And one of them in particular is my interview of my own father. My father and I had a decent relationship, but not great. He wasn't super active in my life. He was not overly affectionate. He told me he loved me and all that, but he was an old school dad. He was hard nosed, like it was his way or the highway kind of attitude. That was kind of how I grew up. You're going to listen and do everything that he says. You're not going to disobey in any way, and if you do, you're going to get in serious trouble. I mean, he was a hard nosed dad, and we butted heads quite a bit, to the point that when I became an adult and had kids, my life in the way that I wanted to raise my family, I realized was much different than how my dad wanted to raise his family. And it caused kind of some rough times between my dad and I during our adult years. And we still have a relationship. Don't get me wrong. We still have a relationship. We still talk. We still see each other every once in a while. They live 4 or 5 hours away from me, but our relationship was kind of strained. And I wanted to have him on because I wanted to hear more about his life growing up, to see if there's some sort of connection to who he was then to who he is when I was growing up to who he is now. And wow. He broke down on that interview. He said sorry to me on that interview. He talked about our relationship, and it made me feel special in that I now know that the stuff that my dad went through when he was little is a direct reflection of how how he treated his family and how he thinks that I should treat my family. It's all this, ever evolving circle that just keeps going round and round. And he constantly told me how proud he was of me and all these things. So that episode was pretty remarkable. It really opened my eyes to who he was as my dad. And then my two other ones are, I had both my boys on. They reluctantly said they would join me on the podcast, and I got to ask them some questions and stuff like that. So that was more of a fun one. And then obviously I've had my wife on as well. So she and I have shared our moments together in parenting, and I've had her on a couple of times.
I think if I had to summarize everything you've just said in answering that question, and I had to summarize it in one word, the one word that comes loudly to my mind is legacy. To each of your guests, and especially the ones that you mentioned specifically, you have left them, you've given them a tremendous gift of a legacy that they will always have with them. The center of this program is based off of Malachi 4:6, which is turning the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers. And this is exactly what you're doing. This is why I have so much respect for your program, for your podcast, for everything that you're doing. It's a tremendous gift. So thank you.
Thank you for saying that, brother. I appreciate it.
How did faith in God become a part of your parenting experience? And how has it given you an advantage over other dads who choose not to involve God?
I grew up in a household that wasn't really big in faith. And I can't remember ever going to church with my parents. And so it was kind of interesting that to grow up in a household where my mom went to Catholic school, my dad didn't really go to church. And here I am, my sister and I, being raised in a home that, my dad didn't necessarily know if God existed, but he wasn't sure, but didn't think he wasn't an atheist either, but he also wasn't sure what was up there. So he didn't know what to believe. My mom believes in God, but not enough to have a solid relationship with it. As I grew up, I started hanging out with a lot of friends and stuff that had different religious beliefs. I went to Catholic school with my cousins because I wanted to hang out with my cousins. I went to some non-denominational churches to hang out with some of my friends because I wanted to go to church because I wanted to hang out with my friends. And then several of my closest friends still are to this day, are Mormons. And so I spent a lot of time at the Mormon Church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, basically all of my teenage years. And I did that not because I understood what a relationship with God really meant, or what the impact God could have on me really meant. I did it selfishly because I wanted to hang out with my friends. That's why I did. That's why I went. And so as I got older, spent 4 years in the Marines. I went to church a couple times while I was in the Marine Corps. And then my wife and I got together. We started having kids. And my wife said, it's really important to me that our boys have a relationship with God. And I said, I think I pulled kind of what my dad was thinking. I said, that's fine. I agree with you, but we don't necessarily need to go to church to do that. I can have a relationship with God and not have to go to church. And she said, no, I understand that, but I want them to have a deep connected relationship with God. In order to do that, we need to go to church, and we need to represent, we need to lead by example and bring them to church. So we started doing that. And I believe my faith in my relationship with God, my kids got to see me when they were young teenagers. I'd never been baptized in my entire life. We went to church one day. They were doing baptisms, and they asked for volunteers. And I have no idea that this feeling was going to come over me, but somebody or something told me to stand up. And it was like in a church full of people, my wife, my kids, I didn't know this was going to happen, but I was sitting there. They said, we're going to take volunteers first. If anybody wants to come up and be baptized, please stand up. And I sat there and something said, stand up. And I stood up. And my wife looked at me like, what are you doing? And they said, come on up. And I walked up, and right there and then got baptized in front of my boys and my wife. And I think that was a perfect example of being a role model for them and leading by example to show them what a true relationship with God really means. And I think it provided for them basically a framework, not only for morality, but also for values. Involving faith in parenting can essentially foster a sense of, purpose and guidance. It can also help instill principles like you got kindness, obviously integrity, compassion. That's a big one, right? And in my opinion, that is probably the difference between parents who incorporate faith in parenting and those who don't.
Now let's take it a little bit deeper. How has teaching your kids to be connected to God spiritually given them advantage over other kids who have not been taught this?
My boys grew up in a faith-based home. 90% of their friends went to church. So they had a lot of similarities with the friends that they grew up with. Both my boys graduated from Christian universities. And so they've gone through private school, Christian school, from the age of kindergarten all the way up through college. And so all of their friends that they hung out with were pretty much practiced some sort of faith or religion. But they also knew the ones that didn't. They went to private school. It was a Christian private school. And they could see the differences in the kids that had a relationship with God and those that didn't. And those that didn't obviously were a little bit more, not necessarily outgoing, but outgoing in the wrong way, if you know what I mean. So I think being connected to God spiritually, I think provided several advantages to them, or maybe several advantages to them that maybe enhanced their emotional or social or moral development. And some of those would be like sense of purpose. Like my boys had a sense of purpose with their relationship with God. I talked about it before, their framework, their moral framework. They knew just from biblical principles and spiritual guidance and spiritual scripture that their moral framework was in place, and they knew what it meant. And then obviously the emotional support. We have their emotional support of not only those that we're connected with, but our relationship with God as well. And then one of the biggest things that the Bible teaches us as human beings is empathy and compassion. And so my boys, even though they did have friends that didn't have faith in their life, my boys still had empathy and compassion for those people, and still were able to make relationships with other kids that didn't exactly know what a relationship with God was. And then the other thing that I thought of when I was reading this question is our coping mechanisms. It teaches us on how to cope through challenging times, and I think that that's a big one, because there's so much in the Bible that can teach us about how to get through difficult struggles that we face, whether we're a child or an adult. Whether if it's stress, anxiety, anger, sadness, whatever the case may be, it provides us with a coping mechanism. So I think that's probably my difference. What I feel, in my opinion, is my differences between my kids that have a relationship with God and those that don't.
I love that answer. I can share my own experience as well with my kids. I had one of my sons, I have two boys, and one of my sons came up to me with a question asking me specifically what he should do in a very specific situation. And I remember telling him, I'm not going to tell you what to do. Now I'm going to share with you what I would do in that situation. And then I'm going to tell you why I would do that. And I did. And then when I was done with my own explanation or my own answer to his question, then I just went back to a biblical framework, as you call it. I love that term, framework.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's not specific, but it's enough to provide them direction to answer their own questions and to find their own solutions biblically. And that's what I did. I just went over the framework with him, over the principle, and I just left him with that. And it was interesting. And time and time and time and time again, I have seen him make good decisions on his own without being prompted. I don't have to tell him you need to do this or you need to do that. He just does things on his own. And I believe internally there's a certain pride that he has that he's able to do that. And there's a sense of security. And a security for being able to do that isn't in me. It's all based off of biblical principles. So in all reality, he is learning to live in faith with God, which is everything a dad could or should want for their son.
Mm.
Now, talk to me about the relationship between God the Father, dads, and their kids. How is this linked to the concept of the image of God? And how would this understanding change how dads parent?
I think the relationship between God the Father and the fathers with their children often draws like parallels in terms of love, guidance, and nurturing, right? But in many religious contexts, God the Father is seen as a perfect model of fatherhood. He's embodying unconditional love, patience, and wisdom. For earthly fathers, this relationship can serve as like an ideal to strive for. Just as like God provides for and protects his children, earthly dads all are also called to support and guide their kids through life's challenges. It includes things like teaching values, offering encouragement, and even being present in their lives, which is something that I talk about a lot, right, on my show. But the way God communicates with his children through prayer and scripture and spiritual guidance, it can inspire fathers to engage in open and honest communication with their own children. And that fosters a sense of trust and security, which is, I believe, in my opinion, essential for a healthy relationship. So, I mean, how does this link it to the concept of the image of God? I think the image of God is basically a fundamental in understanding the relationship between God the Father, earthly fathers, and their children. So the theological idea suggests that humans are created in God's likeness, right? Which encompasses various attributes such as reason, morality, creativity, relational capacity. But reflection of divine qualities means the earthly fathers are often seen as reflecting certain qualities of God, just as God embodies love, compassion, and justice. Fathers are called to exhibit those traits in their relationship with their children. But I also think dignity and worth is important too, because it recognizes that every person made in the image of God instills a sense of dignity and worth. And fathers, understanding this concept, can then be motivated to treat their children with respect and honor, recognizing their inherent value as individuals that were created by God. But I think fatherhood, it's a sacred role, and the role of a father is seen as a sacred responsibility. So by embodying the attributes of God, fathers can help their children understand their own identity as beings made in God's image, right? And reinforcing their self-worth and their purpose.
What has been the hardest lesson you've had to learn that has made you an exceptional dad to your kids?
I think one of the things that I have learned was patience. But having, here's the thing: we don't know when we become fathers, we don't know what we know on raising children, except for our own upbringing, right? Our own sense of how we were raised, and people around us, and how they raise their kids, or things maybe that you read. Other than that, we don't really have a sense of guidance. And so I think one of the hardest lessons that I have learned that helped me become a better father was embracing my imperfections. I know that I am not a perfect dad. I know that I never will be a perfect dad. But accepting mistakes, which happen both as parents and in a child's life, helps a father to be more forgiving to himself and his children, and fostering basically a nurturing environment where learning from errors is valid. I also think that communication is another area that I've really had to learn, but it helped me to open up honest and communication that I think transformed my relationship with my boys. Even to this day, our communication is still evolving as father and son. And I think I think communication is one of the most important factors you can have in order to be a successful dad. I think, obviously we know this, prioritizing our quality of time, right? Learning that being present and engaged is more important than the amount of time spent, that can shift a father's focus from quantity to quality. And this can help obviously build a deeper connection with our children. So those are probably some of the things that I had to learn in order to be, a good dad or a successful dad. And there's, listen, I'm not perfect. I still struggle through things today. And I'll continue to struggle through things. But as long as I understand the concepts and the things that I just shared with you, and know that I'm not perfect, and accept the mistakes that I make and learn from them and grow from them, I could become better from them. As long as I am able to become at least 1% better every day as a dad and a husband, then I know I'm doing the right thing.
Bryan, it's not very often that I recommend other podcasts on this program, but this is an exception because I believe that what you're doing has tremendous value, to the extent that if dads are not listening to your podcast and to your message and what you're saying, they're actually missing out on vital information. I believe what you're doing is spiritually led. I believe you're on a mission, and I believe in the mission that you're doing. So I want everyone, every dad, everyone listening, to go to your podcast and to listen to every episode. If they do that, it will actually do nothing but enhance their own experience, their own connection with their kids. So Bryan, how can dads find your podcast? How can they connect with you and learn more about what you're doing?
I'm most active on Instagram. It's at Dad Up Podcast is my Instagram handle. I do have, Facebook. I have a Facebook group, Dad Up Podcast, or Dad Up Tribe. I also have, LinkedIn, which is under my name. And then I have TikTok and the other things, but I'm most active on Instagram. And if you send me a message, have a question, want to know a little bit more about me, or have a certain parenting question. I get parenting questions all the time through DMs on Instagram. I always respond to them, and I will always communicate with the person when they're asking a question, regardless of what it is. Ask me a serious question, need some serious help, need some serious guidance. I've had dads reach out to me. I've had moms reach out to me. I've had dads and moms reach out to me about each other. So it's okay with me, and I'm okay sharing my thoughts. Listen, I'm not a licensed therapist. I want to make that very clear. I am not licensed to practice as a therapist. However, I do consider myself a professional dad because I've been a dad for a long time, and I've been through a number of areas in my life and my boys' lives to know how to raise kids the right way. And so any help I can provide there, I welcome it. They can also reach me on my email. And Jonathan, you got my email. It's daduptribe@gmail.com. I have a team that answers my emails and gets things all set up there as far as scheduling and stuff like that. But yeah, the Instagram's the main one. And then obviously you got my YouTube channel, which is Dad Up Podcast as well.
And just to make things easier, if you go to thefatherhoodchallenge.com, that's thefatherhoodchallenge.com. If you go to this episode, look right below the episode description. I will have all of the links that Bryan just mentioned posted there for your convenience. As we close, what is your challenge to dads listening now?
My challenge to dads listening now listen to me, dads. Take a moment to reflect on your parenting journey, and I want you to identify one area, just one, where you can improve or grow. Just one. I'm not telling you to fix your entire life. I'm telling you to fix one area as a dad where you can improve and grow. That could be things like engaging in active listening, could be maybe planning one-on-one quality time with your kids, practicing vulnerability. That's a huge one. Setting new family traditions. Family traditions are always big in our household. And one of the most important things you can do as a dad is prioritizing self-care. I work out every single day. I go for runs. I take care of my health because I know if I don't take care of my health, I can't take care of my family. I always express gratitude. So that's another one that you could work on. And then learn something new together, something that you guys haven't ever done together. Learn something new. Those are just a few. But if you take the challenges, some of these ideas, or take this challenge to heart, and remember that small changes can lead to significant improvements in your relationship with your children, you'll be much better off. You remember what I said just a few moments ago. If I could get just 1% better today than I was yesterday, I'm doing a pretty darn good job, because if you add that up even over a year, it's only 1% today, but if you add that up over a year, imagine how much better you'll be a year from now if you focus on that one goal. So dads, reflect on your parenting journey and identify just one area where you can improve and grow.
Bryan, it has been an absolute honor to have you on the Fatherhood Challenge. Thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you've shared with us. It's appreciated.
Thank you very much for having me, man. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship. Hopefully one day we can meet in person and maybe break some bread together.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fatherhood Challenge. If you would like to contact us, listen to other episodes, find any resource mentioned in this program, or find out more information about the Fatherhood Challenge, please visit thefatherhoodchallenge.com. That's thefatherhoodchallenge.com.
I'd like to pause and thank our proud sponsor of the Fatherhood Challenge, Zencastr. If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcast production platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. But the reason I personally use and trust them with the production of this syndicated radio program is their professional broadcast quality sound. There is no better time than now to start your podcast using Zencastr for all your needs. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code FATHERHOOD, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.